We'd like to thank you for joining us for another episode of Looking to Jesus. My name is John Hines, preacher for the Church of Christ in North Ridgeville, Ohio. My co-host is
Daniel Sanders, preacher for the Quail Valley Church of Christ in Batesville, Arkansas. John, good to be on here with you. It's been a few weeks since we last been together. How are
eh,
you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, we've had some stuff going on. Had gospel meetings, had just things we've had to get done during the week. We got some projects going on at homes and church buildings and stuff like that. But anywho, so Daniel, where did we leave off last time we were together?
First Corinthians chapter 10 is what we finished off. So now we're getting into First Corinthians 11 here this morning.
Okay. One of the things we've been touching on are the issue of liberties, and Daniel, I'll get your take on this. It's easy to say, oh, well, he's transitioning to a different subject. No, do you think there's still an element of liberty within the covering issue?
I just say that there's two big key things that are going on in Corinth and First Corinthians: division and liberties. Those are the two kind of main points. And really, here in chapter 10, chapter 11, he touches base with both of them. You got a liberty with one, and then you got division amongst the brethren. The literal division when we talk
Yeah.
about the Lord's Supper with everything. So, I do think that there's, he's touching base with both of them still here with the two main points of division or liberties as being the struggles for the brethren at Corinth.
Do you think the two issues are actually one issue that they're not willing to submit to one another?
Some of that, yeah,
Because I
could be.
mean that plays into liberties, but it also plays into the divisiveness. And when you're talking about the coverings, I mean the first few verses, we're talking about issues pertaining to submission.
Right.
And so we're still talking about that issue of submission and how they need to submit to one another. And so, pardon me for talking you over you so much, but that's I think you're right. That's the big problem in Corinth. That's the issue.
Yeah.
There may be other symptoms, but you go back to it and that's the issue. And even love, 1 Corinthians 13, they're not submitting to one another.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's the big issue is love. Everything else is symptomatic.
Right. Right.
But anyway, all right, 1 Corinthians chapter 11. You want to read go ahead and
Sure.
read the first what down to verse 16 for us.
Sure will. Okay. Imitate me, just as I also imitate Christ. Now I praise you, brethren, that you remember me in all things and keep the traditions just as I delivered them to you. But I want you to know that the head of every man is Christ, the head of woman is man, and the head of Christ is God. Every man praying or prophesying, having his head covered, dishonors his head. But every woman who prays or prophesies with her head uncovered dishonors her head, for that is one and the same as if her head were shaved. For if a woman is not covered, let her also be shorn. But if it is shameful for a woman to be shorn or shaved, let her be covered. For a man indeed ought not to cover his head, since he is the image of the glory of God. But woman is the glory of man. For man is not from woman, but woman from man. Nor was man created for woman, but woman for the man. For this reason, the woman ought to have a symbol of authority on her head because of the angels. Nevertheless, neither is man independent of woman, nor woman independent of man in the Lord. For as a woman came from man, even so man also comes through woman, but all things are from God. Judge among yourselves. Is it proper for a woman to pray to God with her head uncovered? Does not even nature itself teach you that if a man has long hair, it is a dishonor to him? But if a woman has long hair, it is a glory to her, for her hair is given to her for a covering. But if anyone seems to be contentious, we have no such custom, nor do the churches of God.
All right, Daniel, I'd like to just go through it verse by verse and just make points along the way. So, starting in verse 1, imitate me just as I also imitate Christ. You've probably heard people, I've heard people say it's like, well, we're supposed to follow Jesus. We're not supposed to follow other people. Well, if other people are following Jesus, by all means, I mean, Paul says, imitate me as I imitate Christ. And it's like we have other people in our lives who serve as role models.
Right.
And so Paul's saying, as I follow Christ, follow me.
Yeah.
Pretty straightforward. It's
Yeah.
okay to say, I'm not saying you engage in preacheritis. You don't elevate other people to Christ's position. But
Go
if
back to First Corinthians 1, where we talk about the sectarianism or division. Some people were saying they were followers of Paul. Now they were saying they are Apollos or Peter. Paul's getting Paul's kind of addressing some of that here, I think, in First Corinthians 11, verse 1. Okay, if you're going to follow me, don't follow me and say you're a follower of me. I'm following Christ. We have a source of everything.
yeah,
Yes, I may have taught you. Yes, I may have baptized some of you, but the true honor and glory is to be given to God the Father through Jesus Christ. We're following his example. We're looking to him as an example. And this is not the only time that Paul makes his point. If you look at so many times in almost all of his letters, at some point he makes this very similar statement
yeah,
about getting, follow my example, follow the pattern of sound words. Where do the sound words come from? Well, it comes from Christ. You start getting in and follow me as dear children. Look to me as in my example. Starts
yeah,
really hammering some of this, but it goes back always to the source of Christ.
yeah. So it's okay to say, you know, someone else is leading you to Jesus. I'm following them, looking to Jesus.
Yeah,
That's okay. Now, verse 2. Now I praise you, brethren, that you remember me in all things and keep the traditions just as I delivered them to you. Not all traditions are four-letter words.
right.
Some people hear that word tradition and alarm bells immediately go off. Some people are like the Athenians. You remember what it says about the Athenians? They sat around and what did they want to hear? Some new thing.
Yeah,
They just want to hear, oh, we got to get rid of all the traditions and just do new stuff.
right,
The shiny penny. It's like, no, there are some traditions that are good. And
right.
anything that is done repeatedly is a tradition. You're not doing it just for tradition's sake, but I think the Lord's Supper that he's going to talk about here in a few verses, the Lord's Supper is a tradition. It just so happens it's a tradition that's been commanded, but we keep it every week, and so keep the traditions just as I delivered them to you. And so, any thoughts on that before we really get into this?
Again, they're traditions. You're right about this, where people that wanted to try it, well, we want to do something new. We want to do something different for the sake of being different. It's like there are some traditions, there are some things that are good for us to be able to keep and honor and do different things. In obeying God, what it comes down to is don't put those traditions above God. That's what
Yeah.
Jesus talked about with the Pharisees and scribes back in Matthew 15. Don't just honor me with your lips. Don't reject God to keep the traditions. Use those traditions to honor God.
I want to look up what that word literally means there. Let me look it up real quick. The traditions, King James uses the word ordinances there,
Okay.
and it is the word paradosis for what it's worth. That means transmission or a precept. And so, anyway, just wanted to look that up, and it's keep the traditions, keep the commandments. You know, if things are not commandments, just be careful. Don't
Yeah.
don't elevate don't elevate
Don't bind the
non-commanded
liberties.
traditions to the point of being commandments.
Right.
Like you said, the Pharisees, they were real big on that. Verse 3, but I want you to know that the head of every man is Christ, the head of woman is man, and the head of Christ is God. Daniel, my personal take is verse 3 is the key to understanding this whole paragraph. What's the head? As it says, what is the head of woman?
Man.
It's like that's what we're talking about. So when it goes through here, it's like what we're really talking about, we're talking about submission.
Yeah.
And listen, Jesus submitted to the Father. The head of Christ is God. Man, the head of man is Christ. The head of woman is man. The head of Christ is God. You never see Jesus kicking at the goads of the authority of the Father. He submitted. The Garden of Gethsemane, not my will, but thine be done. Right? Jesus submitted to the Father. Man should not kick against the goads, and I mean man as in male should not kick against the goads of Christ. It's like, no, we're under authority.
Yeah.
A woman is under authority. I think you could go on and say children are under authority. You could talk about, I don't know, you could talk about other issues that all pertain to authority.
There's
And that,
submission in every case, going
yeah,
all the way from the least, quote unquote,
yeah.
to the greatest, all leading all the way up to God.
So when you back up and you look at Corinth, Corinth was a very female-centric society, right? We've spoken before about the temples with the prostitutes, all those things. It was a very female-driven society. So it's not surprising that you would have issues pertaining to female roles
Yeah.
in the church. It's like that was the societal issues back then. And so it's being it's being addressed. Like they need to recognize issues pertaining to authority. Verse 4, every man praying or prophesying having his head covered dishonors his head, but every woman who prays or prophesies with her head uncovered dishonors her head, for that is one and the same as if her head were shaved. Daniel, there are different views of this passage, needless to say, right? People have different views of this passage. In my notes, I put it down to three things. I think one issue we've already mentioned. Big issue is submission.
Yeah.
A second issue, though, are the gifts. Every man praying or prophesying. Even that prayer there, when you look over in was it chapter 14, where he speaks about praying in the Spirit, and there may even that those prayers may have been a part of the gifts as well, praying in the Spirit. Anyway, but the prophesying definitely. And so here it doesn't just talk about the men praying or prophesying, it's also talking about the woman praying or prophesying. And so one of the issues are the gifts. And if a woman was praying or prophesying, how did she show her submission to, as it speaks about, again, the head of woman is man, right?
Yeah.
that
Yep.
that's one of the issues. If you have a woman who's prophesying, Philip had four daughters that prophesied. Speaks about that in the book of Acts. It's like, okay, so how are they going to show their submission? And so the covering may have come up pertaining to that. So it's submission, gifts. I'll throw a third one in there, Daniel. Culture. I think culture is going to play a part in all this. And the reason I especially mention culture is because of some of the verses that you've read. Oh, let's see. There in verse 13, judge among yourselves. Is it proper for a woman to do this? Does not even nature itself? There's another verse. There in verse 6. For if a woman is not covered, let her also be shorn. But if and this is the phrase, but if it is shameful for a woman to be shorn or shaved. I think that's an interesting phrase there in verse 6. But if it is shameful for a woman to be shorn or shaved, let her be covered. And it's like, well, it's either shameful or it's not. Well, no, it depends on the culture.
Yeah.
There's a preacher, Daniel, we know, and I can't remember who it is. I always get it mixed up. If it was who was the fellow who went to Africa? Was that Keith Sharp? Did Keith Sharp go to Africa?
I might have. I don't
I can't.
remember.
Anyway, one of them was over there, and they were going through this chapter, and they were talking about, the tail end of the section that we read about if anyone seems to be contentious, we have no such custom, and we're not going to force the head covering. Well, the women over there, a lot of them wore head coverings, and then they studied it out and they started removing their head coverings because they came to the belief that it was no longer needed. But
Yeah.
then they found out, the preachers who were over there found out that in their culture, if a woman did not wear a covering, she was considered a prostitute. And so they told all those women, it's like, you need to put your covering back on because of
Yeah.
the culture.
Right.
Sort of like in the Muslim culture, women wear coverings. And you may be in different places in the world. You may have been in different times down through history where culture, think
Yeah.
Amish women, and
Yeah.
things along those lines where you want to be respectful. Now we're back to liberties. You want to be respectful and thoughtful and consider other people's conscience.
That's right.
And so you have different things going on here in this paragraph. You have issues pertaining to submission, you have issues pertaining to culture, and you also have issues pertaining to the gifts. And so all three of those things are in view. What thoughts do you have so far, Daniel? You got anything you want to add?
Well, again, you think about culture and everything. You go to different areas. You want to try to be respectful to those different things. Again, it comes down to it. If it becomes a matter of trying to bind such things, that's where again the line we start crossing the line too far. As we look at verse 2 of here in First Corinthians 11, Paul says to keep the traditions. There are certain things they were doing that he was trying to encourage them to continue to involve themselves with, to keep, to honor. Things are going to help them. But then, as we kind of opening up this particular subject, he begins to talk about, a covering. Hair can be a covering. If someone needs to cover their head, do it. But a hair can be a covering. We're going to talk about that more here in just a little bit. But you talk about different cultures. In our country, we have different, based upon ours is kind of regional culture, so to speak, where you get into some parts of the South, Southeast, where a head covering is more prominent, more noticeable, more consistent, I guess maybe the word. You up north where you and I both live, where you currently live, and I've lived at before. You don't see it very often. I remember talking to someone there where I was at in Norwalk when I was a member. There's a couple people there that were one person was wearing a head covering, then someone else she felt compelled because she didn't want to leave that person alone in wearing a head covering, and then their children started wearing a head covering and started asking, well, why are you wearing a head covering? Well, because mom's doing it and we're kind of just told to do such things. And so we started trying to study this a little bit together. And it's like,
Yep.
it's a matter of liberty. These people are acting in a way that if they want to, go about wearing a head covering, let them. But, it's not something that should be enforceable in such ways when it comes to this.
And I will say, even liberties need to be taught.
Yeah,
The eating of meat was a liberty.
right.
Could you still teach on the eating of meat? You betcha.
Yeah,
It's like it was taught to help people to mature and understand what really matters and what the passage is really keying in on. And so
right.
that's why I say there in verse 3, what we're really keying in on is submission. The head of woman is man. That's the woman's head is man. Man's head is Christ. Christ's head is God. And so the passage needs to be looked at through that lens.
Yeah,
So we're talking about issues pertaining to submission. We know what's eventually going to happen is over in chapter 14. Over in chapter 14, it's going to make the point in verse 34, let your women keep silent in the churches, for they are not permitted to speak, but they are to be submissive, as the law also says. And if they want to learn something, let them ask their own husbands at home, for it is shameful for women to speak in church. Eventually, we're going to have to deal with that idea, and I think we're already starting to do that. Again, we're talking about issues pertaining to submission. And so back to chapter 11, you have these issues, and like I said, I've already brought up some different views on it. And so let's look at another verse, verse 7. For a man indeed ought not to cover his head, since he is the image and glory of God, but woman is the glory of man. Daniel, I'll tell you right now, I do not buy it. People, a lot of people, older men, they read verse 7 and they immediately say, see that, that's why men ought to take their hat off when they pray, or they'll, take your hat off when you go into the church building.
yeah,
Now, I understand, be respectful. It's like, okay, be respectful. I'm not buying it that that's what verse 7 is speaking about in the context. That what we're talking about is again, who is man's head? Man's head is Christ. That what it's saying is you never cover up Jesus.
yeah,
It's like, no, you let Jesus shine. That's what you do. That's you are submissive. And so again, the head of man is Christ, and the head of woman is man. Man indeed ought not to cover his head, since he is the image and glory of God, but woman is the glory of man. For man is not from woman, but one woman from man. We're getting back to Genesis. We're getting back to Genesis, and we're getting into how everything, was from the beginning, or at least as man fell.
yeah,
When they sinned, what does the Lord say to Eve? It's like your desire is going to be for your husband. But you can tell even before that, it's like, no, God formed Adam. Adam came from God,
Right.
but Eve came from Adam. Adam was not formed, let's just say Eve was made a helper for man. All of that's within this passage. And so, anyway, um, again, we're the issues we're talking about are submission. Daniel, the reason I'm harping on that, and I'm going to keep harping on it, the covering. Sometimes women have the idea, and it's like, oh, well, I just have to wear this covering while I'm praying. After the prayer, whoo, I take it right off and I throw it into the back of the car. And it's like, what, you don't have to be submissive anymore? You don't, do, Daniel, this is actually, sometimes I do have a thought that I hope is coherent. These issues that pertain to submission, verse 4, every man praying or prophesying. Do these issues pertaining to submission, are they only applicable while we are being led in prayer?
No.
It's like, there is no way.
No.
There's no way. These issues pertaining to submission carry on before and after the prayer. And so if that is true, and I think it is, well then, and I mean we've all seen women do this where they're wearing the covering, but the second the amen is said, what do? They take the covering off.
Take it off. Yeah.
My wife always likes to tell the story about someone who she worshiped with up in Michigan, and this lady had left her covering at the church building, and she got home and she was actually in her car. She was wanting to stop and pray about something, and she did not feel like she could pray because she had forgotten her covering. So she did not pray. She could not pray without her physical covering. You got thoughts on that?
I I don't know how you sit there and you look at First Thessalonians 5, pray without ceasing. Doesn't say pray without ceasing with a covering. I I don't get.
I don't understand the whole taking off the covering, putting it on, taking it off, putting it on, taking it off, putting it on. You take it off after prayer and we're about to sing. Well, as we're singing, a lot of our songs actually end with the word amen.
Yeah.
We're singing to God.
Right.
So we wear a covering when we're praying to God, but we can take the covering off when we're singing to God. So it just
Yeah. I
starts.
don't. Yeah. We're starting to kind of just cherry pick whenever that time comes. Really.
And it's like, no, these issues pertaining to submission, and this is not just during the church service. It's like, no, no, no. These issues pertaining to submission carry on. And so I think folks need to remember that. And so, verse 8, for the man is not from woman, but woman from man, nor is man created for the woman, but woman for the man. For this reason, a woman ought to have a symbol of authority on her head because of the angels. You might notice that word symbol there is not in the original. That word symbol is in italics in the New King James, meaning that it was
Yeah.
added by the translators, so to speak. And so folks need to remember that as well. Verse 11, nevertheless, neither is man independent of woman, nor woman independent of man in the Lord. As woman came from man, even so man also came through woman, but all things are from God. Again, you got issues pertaining to submission, but also dependency. It's like,
Yeah.
does man need woman? Well, if he wants to be born, he needs a woman. And it's like, and do women need men? Yep. And that's the point. That man is not independent of the woman, and woman is not independent of the man. Some of that, Daniel, probably goes back to, or at least as far as application, back to chapter 7 about having authority over each other,
Right. Right.
all that business. So then we get to verse 13, judge among yourselves. Is it proper for a woman to pray to God with her head uncovered? And again, who's the woman's head? Man.
Yeah.
Is it proper for a woman to disrespect her husband? Daniel, where's that verse? You can look it up or I can look it up. Where it talks about heirs of the grace. Where is that verse? Is it in one of Peter's epistles?
First Peter 3,
Heirs
7, husbands likewise dwell with them with understanding, giving honor to the wife as to the weaker vessel, as being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers may not be hindered.
that your prayers may not be hindered. Wives need to respect their husbands so that their prayers are not hindered. Husbands need to dwell with their wives with understanding so that their prayers are not hindered. They are heirs together of the grace of life. And so all you recognize these issues pertaining to submission, pertaining to respect, and all these things to the glory of God as well. Verse 11, in the Lord, that idea. But
Yep.
judge among yourselves, is it proper for a woman to pray to God with her head uncovered? Should a woman disrespect her? If a woman disrespects her husband, if a woman disrespects men, is she acceptable in the Lord's eyes? Like, nope. We are called to be submissive. We're called to recognize how the Lord has established things, and so we recognize the headship, the different headships: God, Christ, man, woman, children, on and on we could go. Verse 14, does not even nature itself teach you that if a man has long hair, it is a dishonor to him? But if a woman has long hair, it is a glory to her, for her hair is given to her for a covering. I think you referenced that verse a minute ago
Yeah.
with something that you said. And so her hair is given for a covering. So even for those who hold the view that you need to have a physical covering, the cover if you take that view, that's for her hair is given to her for a covering. Um, and so to look at the next verse, but if anyone seems to be contentious, we have no such custom, nor do the church of God. To look at all these verses, Daniel, I'll ask you, and this is how I like to do it in class, just to put people on the spot. Can you tell me what the Church of Christ haircut for men is?
I can't answer that one, but we want to try to have a certain style or whatever it is. Usually got that nice little part. I guess you could say a little part to the side or whatever it might be.
Both
That might
both
be
you and I, me more than you, have a receding hairline. Slowly but surely it's going away. Does that mean we're actually becoming more holy the older we get because our hair's falling out?
we could travel down that venture that way if we want.
I mean, when it says, does not even nature itself teach you that if a man has long hair, it's a dishonor to him? Again, cultural things perhaps might be in view.
Yeah,
And you should consider cultural things.
right.
Sometimes people, we were talking before we started recording about, the 1960s and things like that.
Yeah,
Well, you had a generation of young people that had no respect for authority at all,
right.
and they were wanting to just be rebellious.
Yeah,
And a
that's
lot
very
of
true.
young people have always wanted to be rebellious. Well, we should not be rebellious. We shouldn't be rebellious as young people. We shouldn't be rebellious towards our parents. In the church, we should not be rebellious towards elders. We should not be rebellious towards each other. We're called to be to be subject, submissive. And of course, we shouldn't be rebellious towards God.
Yeah.
Some people are like, I'm going to let my hair grow out just to be rebellious. And it's like, no, you got an attitude problem to begin with. The problem's not really with your hair, the problem's with your heart.
Yeah.
Daniel, I'll also just in mentioning it, it's interesting, Paul says, keep the traditions as I delivered them. In Acts chapter 18, at verse 18, that's the verse that talks about where Paul had his hair cut off as Centuria. He had
Yeah.
taken a vow.
Yeah.
That's right after he's at Corinth. When he's at Corinth, he would have had longer hair.
Right. Spend that year and a half there, kind of
And
laboring.
so
Yeah.
we're back to liberties. We're back to cultural things.
Yeah.
He had taken a vow for his own reasons. But the bottom line is there at the tail end of the passage we've been looking at. If anyone seems to be contentious, what does he say?
We have no such custom, or nor do the Church of God. So it just matters on culture, liberty,
Yeah,
where you're at. If people want to be able to practice things, let them. It comes one of those.
yeah.
We talk about the rare gray zone, I guess you could say, where it can go yes or no, or there in the middle. Some people could, some people couldn't. It's really a matter of how people will look at that and view that.
What one thing that is not a liberty is submission.
That's right.
That's not a liberty.
That is not a liberty.
And so whatever else is going on, people need to remember that. It's
Yep.
like we're called to be submissive and respect the roles God has given. And you can't bind what God has not bound,
Right.
but God has bound submission.
Right.
So, Daniel, we're going to go ahead and stop there and finish the remainder of the chapter next week.
That sounds like a plan.
Appreciate you. Hope you have a good
Appreciate
day.
it. Thank you too.
Yep. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Join us next week for another episode of Looking to Jesus.
Thank you.